Hey, Jessie Montgomery. So great to see you. And
Hello, Jesse.
so we're really excited to be playing your piece, Banner, in a couple of weeks here. And so a little bit of the history of the piece. So it was commissioned, I know, co-commissioned from something called the Joyce Foundation, but then also from an organization that you have really long ties with, and that's the Sphinx organization, which is dedicated to the development of Black and Latinx string players. Um, when did you receive this commission, and sort of how did that come about?
Sure. They Sphinx initiated the commission and brought the Joyce Foundation in as a partner at the time. And it was 2014 when it was commissioned, and that was the 200th anniversary year of the Star Spangled Banner. And so they wanted to commemorate that historic event. Um, and so that was the impetus of the commission.
I see. So that they wanted you to sort of commemorate the 200th anniversary of the poem
Exactly.
that was written, and then
Hmm.
um,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah, okay. But I noticed it also in your program notes, you referenced a piece that we know, the two of us know very well, and that was Anthem.
Yeah.
And so maybe you could explain a little bit about what Anthem was and is, and then how, and if that was still on your mind, and this was sort of the entry point for this idea.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. So Anthem, when I was teaching and working at Community Music Works with you, we were working on a piece. The CMW had just received a big award from the well, I forget now the
Well, it was from, I just know Michelle Obama was involved.
Michelle Obama
I'm
was
not going to say
involved.
what it was because I'm going to say the wrong thing,
Me
but
too.
yeah,
It was like the Medal of
yeah,
Excellence and Honor and Wonderfulness.
yeah,
Um,
that's what it was. Yeah.
right. And so we had decided we were gonna go as a group and bring a bunch of students and faculty and play at the site where the Martin Luther King Memorial was about to be erected. It hadn't yet gone up, and so Sebastian had this great idea that we would come there as a group and perform a piece of music, and we decided it should be a new piece of music in collaboration with students and faculty. And so then I created Anthem in collaboration with one of our wonderful, wonderful students, Kirby Vasquez. And we came up with this sort of poetic, um, like poem, spoken word piece with orchestral accompaniment, and choir and like singing parts and everything. Because we were going to be at the Martin Luther King Memorial, I wanted to. When I wrote Anthem, I did this thing that's very central in Banner as well, which was to blend the uh, American national anthem with what's called the Black national anthem, "Lift Every Voice and Sing." I realized that they had the same phrase structure, and so I knew they would work well together. And so it was like from that idea and from the inspiration of that, that sort of led me into what Banner ended up being, which is an even more elaborate exploration of anthems of people of different kinds of races and ethnicities that live here in the United States.
Yeah, I think at some point in Banner, there's like seven different pieces playing simultaneously. Is
Yeah,
that right?
that's right.
Yeah, yeah. And so, and in fact, there's even an incantation of the Pledge of Allegiance at one
Yes.
point too. Um, and so by bringing in so many different cultures, were you just trying to sew the sort of the fabric of our of what America is now?
Yeah, yeah, that's essentially what the idea was, and is that, yeah, so sort of within the national anthem, which in itself, when it was born, was an exclusionary anthem, excluding, and also, there we learned, we've learned in the past couple of years that there were verses that were specifically anti-black and racist that were at the verses that had been removed, and so I thought, well, if we're gonna sort of resurrect this concept of liberty, again, then it would this is an opportunity to include voices that had been excluded, and then and also include even more voices within this sort of fabric.
Yeah, yeah, it's fabulous. I didn't know there was that many pieces. Then I saw the score and I was like, oh my gosh, yeah. Because yeah, the Star Spangled Banner and Lift Every Voice do feature quite prominently, but then it's like, oh wow, there's so
Yeah,
much going on here.
yeah.
And
There's
yeah,
there's some snippets of the Mexican national anthem. There's also a Puerto Rican anthem in there, and there's also some of the American like anti-war songs that were popular and folk songs that were popular in the 60s and 70s that are in there
yeah,
as
yeah.
well.
And there's another thing that you include in the score, which I think is just a fabulous effect. And at some point, you bring in the idea of a drum line, and you ask the string players, and this is a piece for strings, to become percussion instruments. So we hear the sort of the roll of the snare and maybe the kick of the bass drum. Could you speak for a moment about the significance of the drum line's inclusion in Banner?
Sure. So a little backstory about when I was thinking about how to structure the piece. I was actually in Bristol, Rhode Island, and I was watching the an annual marching band parade competition, a marching band competition, and I was just enthralled. The whole thing was like my mind was blown. I love marching band, and I love how just it's amazing, like the choreography and how they move so elegantly across this giant field, and so then I did a little research and started decided to actually structure the piece off of a marching band form, which is where there are usually several. They're called strains within the form, and there's usually a slow trio section in the middle, which is actually where the bass solo takes place. And then there's almost always some kind of rev up to the finale. So that's where I have this drumline chorus in, where it's like, you hear the drum chorus coming from far away, and then it revs up, and then we have a big finale. So that's the drum line, and it's such a significant part of American culture, and um, and so I think, yeah. So then I felt, like I wanted to include that somehow in the piece, and I knew it was going to be a fun challenge to try to figure out how to make string orchestra sound like drums. So I thought
Yeah.
that was a fun thing.
Yeah, it's a fabulous effect as it's leading in towards the final part of the piece. Yeah, it's terrific. Just a couple more questions, and so obviously this was written in 2014, and we are 7 years later, and the world is a pretty different place. This was written, 2 years into Obama's second term, and
Right.
a lot has happened then, um, since since then. And I wanted to read just something that you wrote in the introduction of your program notes that I think are maybe even more pertinent today, or at least they ring a little louder today than they did in even 2014.
Mm-hmm.
For most Americans, and these are quotes. For most Americans, the song represents a paradigm of liberty and solidarity against fierce odds, and for others, it implies a contradiction between the ideals of freedom and the realities of injustice and oppression. And maybe if you could just speak about a little bit about that paradox that's embedded within the Star Spangled Banner. Um, yeah, and
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it really, that's, and this was before the Kaepernick protests, that I wrote this piece, and I think what I was referencing is what I was mentioning before, the sort of that the song has been it's been controversial for a very long time. I mean, the idea that people stand for the anthem, and that some don't, is very controversial. I happen to come from a family that where we didn't stand up because we felt that the song didn't necessarily apply to everyone in our home. And I'm, and that's a reality. That's what I mean about the realities of injustice and oppression, that 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 have um, been up, that have affected my ancestors, and also my mom grew up during Jim Crow and segregation, and and then became very political in her life, and so those are some of the ideas that I sort of grew up with. And I think that that's a healthy thing to, I think as Americans, I think it's, for me personally, I won't speak for everyone, but I think it's important to acknowledge, especially at this moment, um, that, as we've witnessed everything that has taken place in the past year, I think that's what we're realizing, is that all of this stuff has been pent up for so long. I hope that people can understand where the sentiment comes from, where you would want to say, where you would want to challenge the ideas of freedom that are professed by so many Americans, but then not always expressed. Let's say, and so yeah. So this is where the interesting sort of conflict of being an American is.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, we're really looking forward to playing it, and I'll confess I had heard it on the radio. In fact, I think that one time when I was driving around and it came on the radio, and I like pulled over and
You
like
texted me.
took a picture, like, "Hey, you're on the radio."
Yeah.
Um, so I didn't realize there was such a prominent string quartet part in it too. And you also reference in your program notes, like in Anthem, that there is a use of solo string quartet, and I don't want to misquote you, but you say both with and against the larger community of the orchestra behind them. Is this in a way metaphorical, or is in?
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, it's metaphorical. It's that, the quartet represents, I treat the quartet as the individual, because I think we're never really alone. We're always sort of part of some pack of some kind. But yeah, the individual, sort of like, yeah, working with and also challenging,
Mhm.
the larger sort of forces. Yeah, so it's certainly definitely metaphorical, in that way.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
and and the way the piece sort of builds is, my point of view on it is that I'm speaking about all these controversies that are very real, but I am an optimist, and I tend to, you know think, we can always kind of push through and get to something unified. So that's how the piece kind of goes. The quartet kind of goes through this battle, but by the end, there's an agreement. Let's say.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, last question before I let you go and have your dinner. Uh,
Yeah. Okay.
um, you know, as people, maybe our audience and our subscribers are hearing your music, possibly for some of them for the first time, uh, maybe you could let people know of some things that they might want to look out for, some projects that you have out there, some very exciting ones. And I think, and I know the ones that you're able to go public with. If you
Yes.
could tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, of course, things have shifted quite a bit. But what's lucky is that for your audience members, and for anyone really, because now things are being a lot of performances are being broadcast on the internet. So there'll hopefully be access to. There's a new version of a piece that I've written for that's gonna for this St. Louis Symphony. It's a actually it's an expansion of a piece I've already written called Starburst, and I that's going to be now expanded for full orchestra, and that should be premiering in the fall. That's a little bit down the road from now, um, um, but I am also still working on this adaptation of a Scott Joplin opera called Tremonisha, and that is going to be premiered next year, 2022. In the immediate spring, there's going to be a broadcast with the Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra of two concerts that I have curated. So featuring my music along with other composers' music that I have grown to really admire. And that's again, the Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra. You can find out more information on their website. It's their Closed Quarters series, and that's going to be featuring music by a wonderful composer named Alyssa Weinberg, Marcos Balter, Anna Meredith, Alvin Singleton, and Maz Swift, and then a piece by myself called Breakaway, which is a string quartet. So that's some of the immediate
Yeah.
stuff.
And so if people just go to social media or even to your website, they'd be able to find
Links to that. Yes,
that's
yes.
great.
As
Yeah.
I keep updating. And
Yeah. Well, Jesse, as always, it's so great to see you. And
I'm so glad you're playing my piece.
yes, we're extremely excited. Yeah, keep in touch, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk.
Of course.
Okay.
Thanks, Jesse.